As of late, Cricket 24 has become quite repetitive, so I went behind the scenes and set up a bunch of custom sliders to make the game more realistic and quite challenging. Now I'm going to show you those slider settings for tests, ODIs and T20s, and there'll be chapters below that you can skip to if you're looking for just one of these. Let's head straight into the custom difficulties as I've got them set up here. And as you can see, there are 9 total different ones that I have set up purely because I want to mimic the realism of different pitch conditions. Now this isn't going to take too long, but we'll go through them starting with the tests. So I've got this labeled as test wins, which basically means West Indies, England, New Zealand and South Africa. We'll kick it off with the base AI difficulty, which is set to legend. I've got the striker timing set at 50. Now this is purely because sometimes batsmen have good days and sometimes they have bad days. If we're going to set this all the way up to 100, it's going to be extremely difficult, but it's going to be unrealistic. The wicket chance is set at 45, it's normally 50, I've decreased it just a bit to make it a bit harder to get wickets. And of course we've set the bowl quality to 100 to make sure that the AI gives us some really good stuff to come up against. The run rate is set to 45, making sure that test teams will go a little bit slower, trying to keep the wickets, and in defending, they should make it a bit harder for us to get wickets as well. Now I've decided as of the next episode in our career mode, I'm going to be using the pro controls again to bowl some spin. We were using the arcade control so we could use after touch, but now that we're moving to pro, I've changed this as well. In terms of the base difficulty, it's set to hardest as you can see. Automatic appeals for thin edges and LBWs are both set to off, and automatic bowling action is off. The ideal release window size is now 7, with the ideal foot plant size of also 7. You can decrease this all the way down to 0 if you want to make it extremely hard, but anywhere between 5 to 8 should work perfectly. You don't want to have to be absolutely 100% every time you try and get the controls right for this. A little bit of leeway makes it a little bit more easy to play and more enjoyable. So I'm going to come down then to spin difficulty. I set this on 85. So with the pro controls, you know that you have to rotate your analogs to get spin. When this is set all the way to 100, it is almost impossible unless you're absolutely perfect every time. So we're going to make it a bit more playable by going down to 85. Of course, you can go higher if you prefer it to be a little bit more difficult. The bowling sensitivity is set to 50. Now, if you made this 100, every single time you try to push the ball to a certain area when you're bowling, it's going to hit the exact same spot that you want it to. But that just isn't very real. If you were bowling in real life, it is almost impossible for you to hit the exact same spot every single time. There's going to be a little bit, maybe a centimeter or 2 each time that you miss your mark with. So we've brought it down to 50 to make it fairly accurate, but at the same time have a little bit of variability in it. Now coming down to the batting, something that most of you probably care about most. We're starting off with the base difficulty on hardest, footwork required is on and shot replacement is off. Now I've seen some people say that this is actually inverted, but I've tested this out and you want to keep it on off so you can actually play the shots that you want to without the AI replacing the shot. I will come down to ball marker display time. It'll make more sense when I show you the physics in a bit. I've set the ball marker display time now to 10. When I was playing on straight up harder settings, this is on 0, meaning there's absolutely no time to make a call about the shot you play. But because I've increased a few speeds elsewhere, I've increased this to 10 just to make it possible for us to actually see the ball before we play a shot. The early shot timing window and late shot timing window are both set to 4, making it possible for us to play a few late cuts or even lob the ball up if we play a little bit early. The shot timing difficulty, of course, is set to 100, as well as the advanced shot timing difficulty. You want to make it as hard as possible to time the ball perfectly. I've set the spin timing window and pace timing window both to 90. I'm going to come down here and show you that there's another timing window, the general timing window, and I've got that set on 85. Now you want to play around with all of these. I've got it at 90, 90 and 85, and that works for me. The higher you go, the later you will have to play your shots. The lower you go, the earlier you would have to play your shots. I find that 90, 90, 85 is the most realistic of the set, but you can change that based on how it plays for you. Of course, go higher or lower. Now we've got our striker skill bonus set to 0 so we don't get any freebies. Our foot placement difficulty is set to 95. Now, normally this would be placed on 100 so that you have to pick the perfect spot to play the shot. But I find that sometimes the game can not play the shot that you want it to play because of some errors in the foot placement. Bringing it down to 95 or even to 90 makes it a bit more realistic, and more often than not, you will play exactly the shot that you are trying to play. The ball quality influence is on 100, so the better the ball, the better the shot you would want to play. Ideal input power boost is set to 5, so a little bit of a boost. It's normally on 0. I've bumped it up to 5 just to give us a little bit of a reward for playing a very good shot. Poor input penalty is on 100. If you play badly, it is not going to generate any power. We've got 0 on the power boost timing window, 10 for a power boost on a full toss. A full toss should generally be a little bit easier to smack in real life, so we're going to keep that at 10. You can go higher if you feel like you need a little bit more power on the full tosses. I've left the edges as is for all of them, except for the high striker skill influence. Now, if we think about test cricket, you'll know that good batsmen generally play with soft hands, meaning that even when they edge the ball, it'll fall short of the slip quadrant. We can't exactly replicate this in the game. So what I've done is I've increased the high striker skill influence just a bit, so good batsmen will find it a little bit harder to edge the ball in the first place. Now, if you increase this a lot, they're not going to edge the ball at all. So I've just gone up to 15, and I find that this works quite well. They still edge the ball quite a bit. The timing window, as I said, is set to 85. There's no power boost for the aggressive shot, and you want to have your play and miss input influence set to 0, so that if you put a bad input, you're going to miss the ball. And as well, have the skill influence set to 100, so weaker players are more likely to miss the ball. I don't really care about the fielding, so let's skip that and come down to the physics. Of course, if you care about the fielding in your own save, go ahead and change that. I've got it set to hardest as is. And then the important part, the physics. This is where I've made a lot of changes for the different regions, be it Australia, WENS as I've labeled it, and the subcontinent. In terms of this, playing in West Indies, England, New Zealand, or South Africa, the pitches generally tend to be fairly pacey, fairly bouncy, and you get good amounts of swing and seam off the pitch. So how I've got it set up currently is for there to be minimum pace of 55, max of 90, so that we get some good pace to come up against. I've gone up with a pace bowling bouncer length to 55. This will mean that when a bowler bowls a bouncer, he'll get a little bit of a boost from the pitch, so the ball's going to bounce a little bit more. The spin bowling bounce is kept at 50, and I've increased the flight to 60 so that you can toss it up quite a bit, get a bit of air, and bowl a bit slower through the line. Of course, as I said, it swings quite a bit in these countries, so we've set the swing to 90. This is going to make it nice and challenging when you come up against a really good swing bowler. The pace bowling revolutions is set to 20. Now, you can go higher, but what this means basically is that if a pace bowler can get a lot of revolutions on the ball, it's going to look like a fast spinner, which is not what we want. We want it to be fairly realistic, and usually when you're bowling pace, it's going to nip off the pitch just a bit, but not too much. So we set it to 20 because these pitches are not too tacky. I've bumped up the spin bowling drift and revolutions both to 50 so that we can get some good drift and good turn and make it a bit more challenging when we're facing it with the bat. The pitch friction is set to 50, and I've increased the bounce to 55 again just to mimic the pitch conditions in these countries. Ball friction and ball bounce is both set to 50. The ball isn't going to be very different whether it's an SG, Kookaburra, or Duke, so we've kept it to 50-50. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the white ball stuff just now. Shot force I've gone down to 45 to make it a little bit harder to hit those 120 meter sixes, which are completely unrealistic. And then we've gone up with the pace bowling visual speed to 75 and kept the spin bowling visual speed a little bit lower. This is going to make sure that when you watch them bowl, it's going to look more realistic. Now, the umpiring is up to you. I haven't changed anything there. And that's basically it for West Indies, England, New Zealand, and South Africa in terms of tests. Now, let me show you what I changed for the other two regions, Australia and the subcontinent. We'll pop back and we'll head over to Australia. All the base difficulties are set exactly the same as it is in the previous one. Where the changes are made are in terms of the physics. So we're going to pop over straight to the physics so I can show you what I've done here. So in terms of the bowling speed minimum, I've increased that slightly, as well as the pace bowling speed maximum to 95. So by increasing it a bit, what I'm trying to say is that the Australian pitches are generally faster. They're faster and bouncier, so we're going to try and replicate that by doing this. To replicate the bounciness of these pitches, we're going to increase the bouncer boost to 60 and the spin bowling bounce to 55. I've kept the flight at 60. Pace bowling swing is down to 85. And as I said, Australian pitches are fast and bouncy, but there isn't as much lateral movement as you would expect perhaps in South Africa or in England. Now we've come down to pace bowling revolutions, and I've dipped this by 5 as well because again, fast pitches is going to grip a little bit less. We've kept the drift and revolutions for spin bowling as is. The pitch friction I've gone down a little bit to 45 again. Smoother pitches, faster pitches, bouncier pitches, and bouncer pitches. We've done that by changing the pitch bounce up to 60. We've kept the ball friction and ball bounce the same, shot force is the same, and the pace bowling visual speed and spin bowling visual speed is exactly the same. For the subcontinent then, everything as I said is the same except the physics. So here, what have we changed? Now the subcontinent pitches are a little bit more tacky in the general sense. They're not as bouncy and fast as Australian pitches, but they do get a good amount of turn, and you can bowl cutters pretty well there for the most part. So we've gone down with the pace bowling speed minimum to 50 and the pace bowling speed maximum to 85. We've made the bouncer length 50 and the spin bowling bounce 45, so less bounce on these tracks. We've kept the flight at 60, kept the swing at 85. It's a little bit lower than what you would expect in England or in South Africa, for example, but there still is a decent amount of swing. We've changed the pace bowling revolutions here to 25, meaning that cutters and stuff are going to come off the pitch with a bit more grip. Spin bowling drift is still at 50. The revolutions are up to 55 again to get a bit more spin, so this is the only one where I've increased it. Pitch friction is up to 60 again for more grip, and the bounce is stock at 50. The ball friction is the same as the ball bounce at 50. Shot force and the visual speeds are the exact same. Now what this is going to do as a whole between all these test settings is it's going to make sure that your game looks pretty realistic. You have enough time to play shots, but at the same time it's going to be quite challenging. And now you're going to have to play it differently based on where in the world you're playing, much like it is in real world cricket. So let's head over to the white ball stuff, starting off with the ODIs. So for the ODIs, we'll start off with the West Indies, England, New Zealand, South Africa again. Now this isn't going to take long because there's just a few changes from the test settings, but they make sense. Let me show you how. So I've increased the wicket chance to 50 and the run rate to 50. Batsmen are going to go harder in the white ball stuff and they're going to give you more chances to take a wicket. So that's all we've done. We've kept the ball quality the same and all of the other settings except just a bit in the physics again. So I've gone up here in the physics and changed the ball friction to 45. So as you would know, white balls and red balls are a little bit different. People argue about which one swings more, which one bounces more, but the general thing is that a white ball tends to stay a bit more fresh. In modern cricket, they use 2 white balls in a 50-over game, so the ball's not going to get damaged as easily, and we're trying to mimic this with a little bit less ball friction. It'll hold up shape a little bit more and skid on a little bit more rather than getting tacky and ripping off the pitch. So that's all I've done there. Everything else is exactly the same for the region. Now for the subcontinent in Australia, we've done exactly the same thing. Only changed the ball friction and the base difficulty up a bit to make it more relevant to ODI cricket. Let's head over to T20 cricket then, and it is pretty much the same thing. We're going to go over to T20 for Australia just as an example. So all I've done here is I've increased the wicket chance to 55 now, but I've gone up with the run rate quite a bit to 65. In modern T20 cricket, teams go at it pretty hard. So we've tried to replicate this, making sure that they make higher scores. So when you're batting, you're going to have to bat better to get those higher scores. And when you're bowling, there's more risk involved in the shots and maybe we'll pick up a few more wickets. Now in terms of the physics again, we've kept everything basically the same, but the ball friction, like with the ODI stuff, is at 45. I haven't really changed anything else in terms of the settings here, and that is basically that. So when you're setting it up for yourself, what you can do is pause during the test slider setup for the region that you want to set up, and then of course make the changes afterwards for the white ball stuff. In terms of the ball friction, and of course the run rate and wicket chance, if you would like that. You could keep that the same. If you think the balls play the same way, then you have to make absolutely no changes. Now, if I change these settings in the future, I will go ahead and drop another video about them. If you've enjoyed this, drop me a like and hit the subscribe button. Now we will be testing some of this out in our next career mode match in the 100. Of course, I've changed some things with the ball markers and all of that to make it a little bit more difficult for me, but we'll see how that goes. Until the next one, please take care and lacquer check you. Bye.